Hello, and we're back for our next panel. Actually, our Cybersecurity Executive Roundtable discussion is always a big highlight of all of our in-person and virtual summits, and usually a lot of fun too. But it's your opportunity to ask questions from cybersecurity professionals from the region, and you'll get unbiased opinions and experiences from them. But we're very honored that they took the time to be here with us today. So let's make good use of everyone's time. Ask all those burning questions that you always wanted to ask but couldn't. You can use a Q&A tab on the right side of your screen to ask questions. So let's get started. Why don't we start out with, I will start with you, Jim. Let's each introduce ourselves and one interesting fact that not many people know about you.
So my name is James Morrison. I retired from the FBI in 2019 after about a 22-year career and 8-year Air Force before that. Worked for Hewlett Packard Enterprise for a couple of years and then became a chief security officer for an MSSP, and now work really nationally doing cybersecurity presentations and driving sort of some thought leadership around, what technologies work, what doesn't work, or at a very least, how do we start those conversations? So kind of the one factoid, during my Air Force time, I was in the Philippines when Mount Pinatubo blew in 1991, and actually have pits in my sinus cavities from the volcanic ash that got in there. And, so I've got a 0% disability, kind of a funny little story, but sometimes the things of our youth, catch up to us.
Oh. I apologize for calling you Jim. My head went to Jim Morrison.
Nobody wants to hear me sing, but I do get asked to do karaoke sometimes, and it's not always a real favorable experience. So.
All right, Matt, how about you?
Yeah, my name is Matt Hellman. I lead the cyber defense operations function at Principal Financial. I don't know that I certainly don't have anything interesting on the order of magnitude of a volcano blowing up, but I'm almost an empty nester. My last child graduates here next week, so I'm pretty stoked about that. So
congrats.
Yeah. All right, Amy.
Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Martin. I am currently the Chief Information Security Officer at Data Recognition Corporation out of Minnesota. I've only been there about 4 or 5 months now, so still finding dead bodies buried everywhere. Prior to that, I led up the information security and M&A functions at Vista Outdoor, which is a retailer with a bunch of different brands underneath that. So my fun factoid is I am very passionate about manatees. So they are my spirit animal, and I've swam with them multiple times down in Florida, and I just absolutely love them.
I heard that they bite, maybe not.
No.
Okay.
all they eat is grass.
Oh, okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
All right, Michael.
My name's Michael F. Anaya. I am the Global Director of Attribution for Palo Alto Networks. I've also started my own company. It's Decoding Cyber. We basically design solutions to make cyber very simple for people to understand. It's an awareness organization. I've been like James. I was in the FBI as well, not as long. I was there for about 14 years. It was a good experience. I was glad I was able to do that. Some interesting fact about me, my favorite movie of all time is Hello, Dolly. the musical. I love it. It reminds me of a simpler time when I wasn't alive, but just like I'm so happy. It's so low key. If you guys haven't seen it, I would highly recommend to see it, especially if you're stressed. It just seems so simple. I love it.
Okay. Well, thank you all for that. I'm going to start out, since we're here on a virtual platform right now. Let's talk about the current work from home and hybrid environment that we're all working from. I'll start with you, Amy. What are some of the processes that you and your organization have implemented to help protect your organization against breaches?
Yeah, so obviously the remote work was relatively new back 3 years ago when everybody decided to exit us, including those workers that were traditionally in-office workers. So I wasn't at my current company, but at my former company, there was a huge focus on endpoint security. And that has kind of carried through, I think, for kind of the go forward strategy within, essentially not the old school mentality of let's protect the castle. It's more, let's protect every single point within the network and within the expansive network. So I think that's definitely one key facet that remote work has changed and has made more important.
Okay. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, I probably mirror a little bit of what Amy said. I think as a global, larger organization, we were already kind of on that journey. We were looking at zero trust solutions prior to COVID. We had a lot of people who were remote. We're just a company that really was supportive of kind of work-life balance and a hybrid workforce. So the risk was kind of an incremental increase, but we had a lot of the stuff in place. We just had to scale it up to really support everybody being remote kind of deal. So that's kind of where we landed.
All right, Michael and James, what about your companies?
I think one of the things that we really took a lot of time in doing is something that a lot of organizations need to factor in is just attack surface management. It's a relatively newer concept. Essentially what it is just monitoring internet facing assets and ensuring that they're protected. Step one of that is find out what your assets are. A lot of organizations think they know, but unfortunately many don't. And so step one is just figuring it out. Pining all your assets, figuring out what do we own, looking at sprawling infrastructure, domains, IP addresses, etc. And so that was one thing that's really quite critical, especially being remote. So that's definitely something that we took to heart, and that is really critical for us to protect assets, especially if you don't know it's yours, how can you protect it? As much as you can.
Right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and off of that, I can play off it as well. This has been a very common conversation, right? And I think Amy sort of touched on this is, 3 years ago, we didn't talk about remote work really. It was the percentage of people that were working more than 50% was like down in the dirt. It was like 15, 18%. And, a lot of companies still rely upon some aged technologies around this. And so this is something I have a lot of conversation. And then Matt mentioned the drinking word of zero trust, right? Because it's become a buzzword, but what does that mean? And what we've started to see is this growth of what we call zero trust network access. And to Michael's point is security says that you're only as secure as the least secure network that connects to you. So as you look at home networks that are connected in through VPN tunnels, the rest of that network is actually now connected. How do I secure myself against all of that threat surface? And so we're looking at endpoint to data. Right. So if we really think about everything we look at in our world is an endpoint or a device or a person that connects up to a data or a asset or something within our network. And that's becoming the conversation. How do we manage access and authorization between every endpoint? And this is a shadow IT problem, right, as well, and manage it to every data point inside of our network. Even cloud. And and I think even Michael touched on this idea of asset management, but it's also data management. And I think that there's a growth market there. And this is something that we've been talking a lot around companies with.
Would you, each of you say that most of your workforce is remote or half and half, or I'm just curious to see where each of you are on that.
I think it's mostly hybrid. What I've run into is a lot of mixed mode. Where they may work 3 days in the office and then 2 days out. So there's this sort of a mixed mode of hybrid. That's what I've been seeing a lot of, and that's what we do.
Yeah, I think it really depends on kind of what your company does as well. If you've got non-knowledge workers that still have access to email, they're obviously going to be in the office because they have to do their job. So I think at our organization, it's a combination of, purely in office, hybrid, and remote, like 100% remote. So
how about yours, Matt?
I think we're pretty well aligned with what Amy said. We have pretty much a mix. We've always had full-time remote well before COVID. So there's still some of that. There's more of that, I would say, of course, today than there was prior to COVID or the pandemic, but it's a pretty good mix. And there are certain roles where you do have to be in the office. So there's that too.
Well, how would you guys say you keep your team connected, since it sounds like obviously half of us are remote half the time, or if not all the time? How do you keep your team connected?
I think this is the growth of the Teams environment, right? Teams is a good example of this sort of social chat type function that tries to pull everybody into a team environment. I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to create that, part of a group. But I think at the same point we've got a little bit of an issue of over communicating or too many groups. I mean, I laugh because I'm sitting here looking at my Teams group and I think I'm a member of like 85 different teams. So does it really work, or are we into almost an overage of communication? So it's a challenge, I think. I know it's a challenge for us.
Yeah, for sure. At Data Connectors, we've got probably 14 employees, but we've got like 30 teams.
Right? You're like, wait a second.
Yeah, right. Anyone else? What are you doing to keep your teams connected?
I would say
engaged?
One observation I have is, I mentioned that we had some remote employees before, and I think it was, we learned so much during the pandemic. We got much better at just working together remote, so that now that we're kind of going back to the new norm, well, that's not exactly what it was before, but the new normal, and I'm, for example, hybrid. I come in 3 times a week, usually at least. We're in a much better position to work together and support those full-time remote employees better. We just learned so much through that process. So that's one observation I would have.
All right, Michael?
A lot of things we do are just kind of, I think, what many have done in the past, just is try to build relationships remotely and have remote functions. We'll do a lot of events whereby we'll use another vendor to provide like chocolate making stuff. We do things that just allow people to sort of connect. I have someone on my team in charge of putting together social functions, and it's to really help encourage people just to relax and unwind a little bit. And those are always just kind of fun, but we sprinkle those throughout the quarter. And then also we do leadership conversations. We do a lot of things remotely because Palo Alto is a remote organization. There's a physical aspect and physical component, but it's definitely hybrid. So it's something that the organization collectively has embraced.
Okay. So I'll kind of shift gears a little bit here. A question that kept coming up all day long. Everybody always wants to know, what kind of certifications do I need to get from A to B? If I wanted to become a CISO or a CIO, do you recommend certain certifications, or what do you think that career path should look like? What kind of advice could you give our audience that want to aspire to be a CISO? Let's start with anybody that wants to go.
Well, I'll take a first stab at it.
All right.
So, I mean, there's definitely different paths into the security space. I came through from the audit beginnings. So, early on in my career, I got my CISA from my SACA. It's a certified auditor certification, and kind of navigated my way. I had a role in business continuity and disaster recovery for a little while. I did some project management and got my PMP. I think ISACA has some good certifications, but more on the technical side, there's I would say the best, one of the easiest, best ways to kind of get started on a security certification is the Security Plus certification. As you kind of work your way through management, there's various other certifications that you can add on to. Obviously, the CISSP is probably the capstone of overall technical security, in my opinion. But then, if you're going to get specialized, there's specific, OSCP hacker certifications, and other various, when you're at that level in your career, you obviously figure out what makes you excited about security and focus in on that.
Okay. Matt, what advice would you have for someone trying to aspire to be a CISO?
Yeah, I mean, I think about my role, and I'm normally talking to people about much more technical roles, and in that capacity, I don't focus on certifications really at all. It's really about show me how you've developed yourself? What are the things you're doing on your in your free time? Do you have a passion for cybersecurity or this specific specialization like offensive security or whatever it is? So I haven't put as much thought, to be honest, into the CISO role. I will say that my CISO came from the business and IT, and we've worked together for a really long time. And when that first happened, I was a little bit concerned about it. But to be honest, it's amazing the difference it makes when you have a better understanding of the business, especially in that role, right? You're just able to translate the things that I might talk about as a technical person into language the business understands. So
soft skills are important.
Absolutely.
Probably.
Yep.
Yeah.
And just,
Yeah, I would probably start off for counseling first to make sure they really want to engage in the CISO. I mean, it's a resiliency thing. It really is, because it's just you really got to have a pretty thick skin from what I've and understanding that when something happens, they're coming to you. I mean, they're going to be like, "What's up?" And so you really have to. And I think, and to Matt's point, that soft skill, I always say, writing and speaking is probably the most important things. You really do need to understand. And when I'm training, I teach kids, in the cybersecurity field, and to Amy's point, I might start with Security Plus as a really good baseline, but beyond that, I want to see mentorship. I want you to get in and do some internship type stuff and determine what part of security do you really want to do, right? If you want to be an offensive person, it's a different game completely than being a policy person versus being a defensive person versus being anything along those lines. So I think the cool thing is that cybersecurity is a really rapidly growing environment, and it's growing in the number of opportunities, especially at that mid-size level. My joke is 10 years ago, we didn't talk about cybersecurity, right? It wasn't a career field, but it now is. And so I think that's the cool thing, being in on that ground floor really gives opportunity. So just get in there, get internships, get some chops, and decide what you really want to do and be passionate about it.
All right, that's great advice. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the only thing I would add to this isn't necessarily certification centric, but it's really more something touched upon by a few of the panelists, but it's leadership. I think one of the things that most organizations are starting to do, one of the best CISOs I know, or at least the grouping of them I'm thinking about, are proven leaders. That's something that's sometimes overlooked. Sometimes we're looking for someone who's very technical, someone who's very proficient in understanding of infrastructure, architecture, and that makes sense to a degree. But honestly, the really good ones are great leaders. They motivate people. At the end of the day, if your CISO can, roll up their sleeves and pound out some command lines, that's fun. But I'd much rather have someone who can motivate, who can build a team, who can empower a team. When something goes awry, that person isn't going to solve the problem. The team they build, the infrastructure they build under them is what's going to basically be able to solve and address those issues. But you need to have someone who can do that. And that's not an easy task. I think a lot of organizations are starting to learn that when they hire, and they need to bring in strong leaders.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of IT sort of people are introverts. CISO or C-level role is more of a combination of introvert and extrovert. So that's just my opinion. I don't know why I threw that in there. But anyway, so we have a question. It goes along with certifications. Oscar Griffin from Richton Park wants to know, is there any value in CompTIA pen test certification? Does anyone know?
Well, again, this is what I was kind of talking about. Is it really depends on what path you want to take, right? If you want to be a pen tester, if you want to go in that direction, this is a step in that direction. I mean, you're also looking at certified ethical hacker and some of those kind of things on the offensive side. So that's where, the certifications stacks are getting a little bit more defined. I mean, CompTIA has always been a good basic certification for getting into a particular field. I mean, I have A+ and Net+ from 30 years ago or 25 years ago, right? And so that would be my encouragement. If that's where you want to go, man, get good at it. I mean, I tell kids all the time, if you want to do Python, be good at Python. Don't just be enough. Be really good at it. Somebody and be passionate. I mean, so if you want to do pen testing, go for it and be the best pen tester. Don't just settle for something.
Well, that sounded like a leadership motivational thing right there. If you're going to do it, go for it. Anybody else have an opinion on that, or any advice, experience share? No. What about?
I'd maybe add that, I kind of hinted that I don't care about certificates, and that's not entirely true. I think they matter, but again, you have to go further than that. And I would also add that you get to a point where if you're just stacking up certifications, it starts to actually have the opposite effect, because it's just a person who's farming for certificates, right? So if you get the CompTIA pen test cert, be able to talk about and have your elevator conversations about what else you're doing from a pen testing perspective to learn the craft.
Okay, so a lot in our audience are small to medium-sized businesses, and I guess I can start with you, Amy. If I have a minimal budget, where do you think my security focus should be? And is there any free or low-cost suggestions or solutions that you might have? And I'd like to hear from everybody your opinions, but Amy, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is definitely kind of a need to prioritize when you have, significant or insignificant, I guess you would say, budget allotted for security. You kind of have to, I would start from taking it from a risk perspective and looking at where are my biggest risks within the organization. And a great example of something that can be done for a limited budget is phishing. It's a huge risk. Not going away anytime soon. People are getting smarter at it. ChatGPT's making phishing emails. So really making sure that your end users are paying attention to phishing campaigns is probably a relatively relatively cheap cost to the organization. You looking at what tooling you do have and whether or not you can utilize that to do some security functionality. For example, most people have O365. If you've got E5 licensing, there's a whole host of security tools. Now, whether they're best in breed or not, I don't want to get into technology specific vendors, but you could look at, could you put something in place with a solution you already have? And then I kind of get back to the risk. There are a fair amount of risks that are specific and unique to the organization. What do they want to protect the most? And really focus in and hone in on what controls you can put specific to that environment and those key facets of data within your environment.
All right, thank you.
One thing I would add to that, I think step one is you need to, Amy touched on the really critical component of risk. The step that probably comes a little before that is you need to assess the likelihood of an attack. Not every organization is going to face the same sort of onslaught of threat actor. So I think one of the things, especially for small and mid-sized business, you need to ask yourself, well, do we need to worry? And most do to some degree, but if you're not really dependent on online, you're not an online operator, like think of a small restaurant in the Midwest, you have very little point of presence online, you may have your website, but that's really about it. You're not really gonna have to worry about much versus you're a defense contractor. You might still be a small organization, but you're doing business online. You have a lot of critical infrastructure you're supporting. You're gonna be a higher target. So step one is just make that assessment. And then you can then start looking at risk associated with the assessment based on your profile. And then to answer your other question, Don, in terms of low cost things people can do that I would encourage them. One simple one, I really think all organizations should do this. Have your team and members of your team join professional organizations. There's a lot out there. Any ISAC. So it basically stands for information sharing organizations like information sharing and analysis centers, or ISACs. So there's FS ISAC, financial sector ISAC. There's all different types. There's InfraGard. There's a whole litany of them. All are free to join for the most part. The benefit there is you empower people to attend these events. They'll talk to others. Others will share with them. That's free intelligence. It's free information that your team is gaining by just having your people network and liaison with others in the industry.
Yeah, so, and I think, and I like where Michael started there, because I would probably start in the same place, right? Let's talk about what the risk is. But what we're also starting to see is there's a compliance insurance conversation that's starting to push as well. What compliances are you required to do? If there's some compliance that's going to probably drive most of what you have to do at the start, right? But then the next thing is policy. Do you have an incident response plan? Do you have a disaster recovery plan? Have you tested it? Right. This is very low lift typically. You can work through different organizations. NIST has a way, developing it. Then, and even before that, and this was sort of to Michael's point, we always see people say cybersecurity is people, policy, and technology. I think even before that, it's a strategy with the outcome. So you need to understand, once you know the risk, you should have a strategy defined without any technology thrown in. Then from there, you should have outcomes that come from that. What worries you? Is it ransomware? What's the outcome? But I think what's happening right now is we're seeing a lot of people go out and they go to trade shows and they just throw technology on the stack without a really clear understanding of the outcome they're trying to drive to. And then they get hacked and they go, well, I bought this tool, but it's not about tool. It really isn't. It's about having, how is that tool implemented? How is that tool managed? Is it integrated with other tool sets? These are all questions that are falling on the kind of on the side. So that's where I would start even before any technology. Then in the technology conversation, to Amy's point, there's a whole lot of stack there. We can talk for days on that.
Okay. Well, let's shift a little bit and let's say we have had an incident. Where should our initial focus be? Why don't you take that one first, Matt?
Yeah, actually, I do want to go back to the last one just because there's an
Sure.
organization called the Cyber Readiness Institute, and you can Google that. And it exists solely to help small and medium businesses get their arms around cybersecurity. And so if you Google that, you can go there and they'll have a starter kit and some other things to help you choose and focus on the things that are the biggest risk for you. In terms of incidents, I mean, this is a tough one, right? Because every incident is unique. So the specifics of the incident are really gonna drive that and how you need to respond. So
I think one thing I can add for one of the first things organizations should do is validation. There's been many situations when I was FBI, we'd respond to a situation and it turns out it was a false alarm. The organization thought they were dealing with a compromise and realized it was just an executive who happened to be overseas in a country that they thought they had no business in, and he just was there for business. And then they said, never mind, everybody go home. It's all good. It's all good. It's not a critical
calm
data
down
breach.
before you freak out over an incident, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like assessing a fire. First, you have to witness it, assess what's the possible damage. And so really validation, you first validate, hold on, is this an actual incident? That should be your first step. And then you can then follow thereafter based on an incident response plan.
Yeah. So, and I would say to incidents, so much of it is the work should be done before it ever happens. The problem is once an event has occurred, if you have no planning in place, then you're in a firefighting mode. That's not the time to be looking for fire extinguishers, and that's not the time to be looking for a hose. That's not all of that. Everybody should know all that. And what I found, and to Michael's point, I'd go out on these deployments with the FBI and you'd walk into an incident and they'd be like, I don't know what to do. And that inability or that paralysis in the moment, and you're like, what do you want me to do? I'm here as the FBI. All I'm here to do is kind of observe or ask for data on the back end of it. And so what I really try to get people to, you've got to be prepared. I hate to say it this way. I always tell it's with Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face.
Right.
And if you don't have a plan and you've not tested the plan and everybody knows their role in the plan, guess what's going to happen when bad occurs? It's just it's bad. And unfortunately, that's not where you want to be.
So, go ahead, Amy.
I was just going to quickly say, in addition to, having a plan, it's really that testing of the plan that gets people thinking about where are our gaps, what are we doing, having it be, at minimum quarterly. So everybody's, up to speed on how we're going to handle situations. Every situation is going to be different, like Matt said, but at the same time, you're practicing behaviors and practicing processes that will help you in that moment. So you're not paralyzed by, oh no, what do we do? And especially bringing in the executive team. Oftentimes they're the ones that are left behind. And if it is a true incident, you need to be ready with communications. You need to be ready with the legal team. You need to be ready, across the C-suite to adequately respond.
And part of this is insurance, right? So cyber insurance may even drive you in a certain way on incident response. I've run into a lot of insurance policies that specifically spell out what you have to do. And they may tell you you can only use X number of incident response companies should bad occur. So knowing that, and like one company I just talked to, they said that in the post incident, the insurance told them that if X occurred, if they had a ransomware attack, the insurance company reserved the right to rip out equipment and install the equipment of their choice. And nobody knew that. Nobody knew that was, and so now they've lost control of their environment, but now they've lost it a second time. I felt like they got kind of exploited because the insurance company then turned around, went to an MSP and deployed all this technology. And they're like, but this isn't our technology. So you got to know what your insurance says. And to Amy's point, everybody needs to know that before bad occurs.
Yeah. And I'd maybe add, if you're a smaller organization, you may not have some of the robustness of the plans, but I think in those cases, it's important to find a partner in advance of having an incident. And maybe it's also a technology partner, like a managed detection and response type service, that can really kind of augment what your capabilities are, because they're going to be limited if you're a fairly small organization. So.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I did want to ask you, how do you guys respond to, we see it on the news, we see some sort of huge cybersecurity breach or ransomware sort of thing on the news every single day. And how do you guys respond to that? And how do you deal with the board when they see it? Who wants to take that one first?
Well, we're actually going through an event like this right now. Our main corporate office is actually going through this. And I think first of all, I'm a big believer in lessons learned. What do I learn from other people's events? We should learn something. There should be an opportunity there. But where I think companies show their mettle is not in immediately what happens, but where do we see 30 days out, right? So 30 days out, if I look back at the way a company reacted, do I feel at that point in time they were forthcoming? They let everybody know there was a breach. They let the customers, whoever was affected by it, suppliers. And I think those are some of the things that when you're in the middle of the forest, you're not going to be able to pull that out. But I think it's that 30-day, 60-day mark when you look back and you go, wow, that company actually handled it really, really well. And they were honest. I think that's where I see most of that value.
Okay. Anyone else? How do you guys respond to all of these breaking news stories of breaches and ransomware attacks? And how do you keep your board of directors calm?
I actually think that it's great to be able to highlight some, businesses that may be close to yours or in the same sector. So I'm in the education space. There was a large Minneapolis public schools data breach that was definitely impactful in the news, in the local news, and it really spurred some good conversations among the executives, and really through those questions and the kind of the discussion that ensued from it, it was also an educational moment. What they would ask, what are we doing so that this doesn't happen to us? And that's the perfect time to really educate people that don't understand security about what's going on and what we're doing to protect the organization.
All right.
Yeah, for us, it's part of our threat intelligence capabilities. So we're gonna have reports where we try to summarize the major things that are happening, and then add context. Why does it matter to principal, or maybe it doesn't matter to principal, but providing a regular report on some sort of frequent basis so that executives know that we're being proactive with this stuff is really important.
Okay, Michael, do you have anything?
I think everyone said it very well, but to kind of double back what Amy highlighted, I would lean in, embrace the situation, especially if it's not you, and highlight what you've done well. And it could be a great story for you to share your accomplishments. Hey, this won't affect us for the following reasons. This is what we've done, and we want to continue this path. We needed to consider about making these adjustments. So that could be an opportunity for you to pitch what you want in the future.
I maybe even add to that, you can do kind of quasi tabletop exercises with these incidents that happen to other organizations, and learn quite a bit from those processes as well.
All right. Well, that's all that I have. Thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate your advice and your experience shares with us. And we hope to see you again soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.